Morning. I'm Rhonda Lucci, and my preferred pronouns are she, her, hers. I'm a lifelong Methodist. As soon as I was born, I was bundled up and taken to First United Methodist Church in Middletown, Ohio, the setting for Hillbilly Elegy. It was small town USA in all its glory. As soon as we could get all four grandparents in town, the whole family piled into the first pew to be present at my baptism. I can only assume that they took the vows earnestly to follow through on their part to raise me as a child of God and nurture me in the faith. I got more Methodist as I grew up. I can only remember missing church once in the years 0 through 18. I was so sick with the flu that my parents let me stay on the couch while the rest of the family hopped into the car and trooped off to church. I guess they figured I was too sick to get into trouble. Every week I went to Sunday school. I sang in the cherub choir when I was little. When I got older, I moved up to the Wesley choir and served as an acolyte. As a teenager, I participated in confirmation classes, MYF, and attended church camp. When I was in high school, I taught Vacation Bible School. All of this is to say that I wasn't raised in the church in a go-through-the-motions kind of way. I was all in. My family was all in. When we were in town, we didn't miss church except for that aforementioned flu incident. It was a priority. You'd think that a kid might not like all that church. Aside from having to wear a dress, I really looked forward to learning and questioning. I liked that I grew up in that place and that I was truly known in that faith community. I liked singing in choir. I loved the harmonies of the hymns accompanied by our pipe organ. The light streaming in through the stained glass windows filled my soul. I even liked the sermons. Yes. What? They were uplifting and joyful, full of challenges to always strive to be better, and full of messages that love was given. Through love, we were given the gift of grace. Let me overlay my coming-of-age story that happened at the same time. I was different as long as I can remember. When I was 10, somehow I was able to put a label on it. I was gay. I don't have any idea how I even figured out the label. It was the early 70s. Nobody talked about this at home, in my classroom, or at recess. My friends didn't talk about it. I didn't see anything on TV or in books I read. Nobody ever talked about it at church, not from the pulpit, not at Sunday school. Although I didn't hesitate to ask questions about everything else, somehow I knew not to ask anyone about this. A lot of people have scary stories about how their church told them that if you were gay, you'd go to hell, or that you weren't welcome, or you had to change who you were, or that God didn't love you. I don't have stories like that about my home church. Sermons from the pulpit and lessons at Sunday school focused on messages of God's grace rather than condemnation. I can't remember ever being condemned or unwelcomed specifically or in context of things that were said. I was just invisible, or at least a part of me was invisible. In elementary school, middle school, high school, and college, I was invisible to myself too. I could happily worship at First United Methodist Church in Middletown and learn about God's love and grace with as much of myself as I was showing to anyone, including myself. Eventually, I went to college, graduated, and got a grown-up job in Dublin schools. I moved into an apartment, started settling into my new life. Before too long, I decided I could not any longer ignore who I was. I started to slowly come out to myself and even started dating. Once I got somewhat settled in my new life, my mom said all she wanted for Christmas was for me to find a church home. I asked her, why on earth would I want to do that? And she said she wanted me to meet some nice friends. I told her that my friends were just fine, thank you very much, and that I'd never want to hang out with a bunch of church people anyway. I'll circle back to that. On a side note, I wasn't out to my family since I was barely out to myself. So Mom was a catalyst for me to find a church home. I found a United Methodist Church that was close to my house. A minister I had known from First Church Middletown was the senior pastor, and the choir was under the direction of Dr. Jim Gallagher, who also directed the Ohio State Men's Glee Club. This church was a match made in heaven. As I tend to do, I jumped in with 2 feet. I joined the choir. I attended adult Sunday school classes and started attending a singles fellowship group. Okay, that didn't go well. Eventually, I transferred my membership from First Church Middletown to my new church. Although this church didn't preach hate from the pulpit, they weren't preaching inclusion either. I didn't know where they stood, so I assumed where they stood. In 2 years of attending regularly and in being involved in activities, I didn't make any friends. People were nice, but I was too guarded for anyone to really get to know me. The difference this time was that I could no longer, in good conscience, check part of myself at the door. It didn't feel right to worship with only a part of me when God had created all of me. Eventually, I gave up on going to church. Don't ask, don't tell wasn't setting me up to grow in my faith. So why stick with Methodism? The obvious question would be, why not attend an already welcoming church? Why stick to this denomination? Remember, I was raised a Methodist. I did love the old familiar hymns in 4-part harmony, followed by a fellowship hall full of casseroles. But it wasn't just the familiarity that made me want to stay a Methodist. It was the theology that made sense to me. I believe Christians should think and question. It deepens our understanding. And we should all know that we are loved and given this gift of grace that we can never earn. When Susan and I first started hanging out, we started having those deep conversations about God. I remember her asking me during a break in a tennis match if I believed in God. I said, yes, but I don't know if I believed it deep in my heart. She kind of caught me off guard. She suggested we start looking for a church. After several Sundays of trying different places, we landed at King Avenue. Her week to choose, she'll tell you proudly. That very Sunday, we knew we were home. We started attending regularly, joined the summer choir, then started singing with chancel choir the next fall. We were able to worship here just where we were, as we were. No need to check ourselves at the door. We just celebrated 21 years at King Avenue. In those 21 years, I've taken disciple Bible study and other faith formation classes, been a storyteller, a scripture reader, been a part of several small groups, notably Fight Club and Sparklers, being a singer in both chancel choir and the Blenders, served on many committees and ad council, been on stage for 19 King Avenue Players productions, square danced, tap danced, cooked, crafted, and Tupperware partied. I'm on staff, and I was married in this church. In 2017, this beautiful King Avenue sanctuary, my dad walked me down the aisle. Susan and I took our vows in front of this altar. Our family and friends, you know, the church friends I didn't need, they were sitting in these pews as our cloud of witnesses. King Avenue is my home and the cornerstone of my life. I'm finally able to worship with my whole self and work towards reaching my potential as a disciple. I am God's creation, exactly as I am. I am fearfully, wonderfully, and fabulously made. And I'm welcome here. You are too, by the way. Thanks be to God for this place.
So every year, Columbus Pride falls on Father's Day weekend. For those of us gay dads, it's a whole weekend of fun and festivities. My name is Joe Matessa, and my pronouns are he, him, his. and I've been coming to King Avenue now for about 10 years. I grew up in a Catholic family, half of which was of Italian descent, and didn't fully come out until I was 32 years old. As an early teen, I came to realize that I didn't have the same feelings towards girls that the other boys did, and knew that I was different. But not being straight simply wasn't an option. I was nurtured to grow up and marry a nice Catholic girl. That being said, I knew that I wanted to get married and have a family, but being gay would deprive me of those options. The Catholic faith didn't allow same-sex marriage. It made it very clear that we were not suitable to be parents. Sorry. As I near my late 20s, it became increasingly more difficult to suppress those feelings and continue faking it. In 2001, my new best friend Laura invited me to join a rooftop party in Chicago overlooking the Chicago Pride Festival. And so I did what anyone else I thought did, and I made a beautiful layered taco dip to bring to the party. And shortly after we arrived, one of the other guests announced very loudly to everyone in the whole party, "So, who brought the cute little gay boy that keeps telling everyone he's straight?" No straight boy brings a taco dip like that to a party. And so it began. I was both terrified and liberated at that moment, all at the same time. Fast forward 20 years. Last spring, my 12-year-old twin boys started getting bullied at school. Other boys were telling them that their dads were sinners and going to hell because they were gay. The Bible says it's wrong. But Poppy, we're Christian and we go to church. Why are they saying that? It got to the point where we had to sit them down and do a whiteboard lesson on religion, politics, and discrimination of the LGBTQ community. It's hard for someone their age, or frankly at any age, to understand how religion can be at the core of bias and bigotry toward the LGBTQ community. But I thought we were all the children of God, and that God loved everyone. In coming out, when you finally get to the other side, if you ever really do, the shame of religious persecution that caused you so much pain for so many years often leads to anger and resentment toward the institution of religion. As a result, many never return to the church. Today, there are over 240 discriminatory laws trying to get passed in the United States that further strip the rights of LGBTQ Americans. And the right-wing so-called Christians are using religious freedom as the weapon to get them passed. That's why it's so important for churches like King Avenue to have such a prominent presence in the LGBTQ community, not just in the month of June, but all year long. Shortly after we moved from Washington, D.C. to Columbus, I began my search to find an accepting and inclusive church for our family. I'd heard a lot of buzz about King Avenue and decided to give it a try. At the end of Morning Blend, Julie Hazelbaker approached me and introduced herself, asking me if this was my first time at King Avenue. She then took the time to give me a tour of the church and tell me all about her experiences, and that began my journey at King Avenue. In King Avenue, I didn't just find a church, I found a community, a home, a family, and a few years ago, a husband. So the next time you see an unfamiliar face here sitting at the back of church, make sure you do a Julie Hazelbaker and make them feel welcome. You never know how you could change that person's life forever.
Good morning. Happy Pride and happy Father's Day. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Gina Manat. I use she, her pronouns. I've been attending Morning Blend for about 7 years, and married to Jonah, and we have a 5-month-old daughter, Ruthie. After growing up in congregations where LGBT identities were considered sinful and shameful, coming to King Avenue felt like home to me. Growing up, I didn't know that communities like this existed, and assumed that to be LGBT meant turning your back on God, that these two couldn't go together. From my very first Sunday in Morning Blend, I don't remember the songs or what the sermon was about. I remember the exact seat I was sitting in, and I remember right in front of us, there were 2 women seated, and one of them had her arm around her partner. And I remember I couldn't help but stare at them the whole time, thinking, how is this possible in a church that someone can be so open about their relationship? Since coming to King Avenue, I have come to know community and love in a way I've never experienced before. I feel seen and loved for me, not despite who I am, but because of who I am, by the congregation and by God. Anna Giosi was actually one of the first people I talked to about faith and my identity. The Coming Out with God group helped me further process this with other individuals going through a similar journey. Participating in Blenders and through Jonah participating in Heart Song, we further experienced community like never before. Additionally, to sing liturgical songs that have been changed or written to be inclusive helps serve as a true expression of God and the kingdom to me. I frequently sing the song that our choir sang this morning, Child of God, to Ruthie. King Avenue has shown nothing but support and love for me and Jonah through my coming out process, as we married and began our life together, Jonah's transition to his male identity, through the transgender military ban that threatened Jonah's National Guard career, his deployment to Kuwait, and as we welcomed our little one into the world. Since Ruthie's come into our life, I cannot express how grateful I am to have a faith community like King Avenue, one that we can bring her to that celebrates all identities, that we have a children's ministry where I fully trust everything that they teach, and know she'll be treasured for who she is, where she will be able to watch and eventually sing Open Doors as she grows up, a song that's been incredibly healing for me in my faith journey. The first few Sundays we brought Ruthie to church with us, I teared up as I watched children come forward and sing Open Doors, thinking about how someday that'll be her, that this will just be so normal for her, that she'll never have to heal from religious trauma the way that I have. As I prepared for my witness today, I thought a lot about how Pride parades have meant something different for me over the years. Each one's had a special meaning. I remember my very first one. We walked to the Columbus VA where Jonah works, and I remember holding hands with Jonah, and watching other couples holding hands, and just thinking how normal, how celebrated and accepted it was, just feeling so loved for who we were. I remember walking shortly after Pulse, and remembering feeling a little bit of fear, but also pride to be out, to be who we were in light of what had happened. This year marked the first year that I walked with King Avenue in 7 years. It was so special just being able to walk with our church, to be able to be so out, to show others that there are churches like ours that are so accepting and so loving. I think about how there's someone out there in that crowd that probably for the first time saw a church like ours and realized that there's a church that's so accepting and so loving. That was me once. And so I really reflected on that yesterday. By showing up and being ourselves, we continue to change lives, just as mine once was and continues to be by this church. From the bottom of my heart, thank you so much to our King Avenue chosen family for demonstrating God's inclusive love to us. Thank you.
I was born in 1946 and baptized in this church. Don't bother, I'm almost 76. My parents joined King Avenue in 1941, and our family grew up in this church. We participated actively through our years, taking part in Sunday school, children's choir, youth fellowship, and during our college years. My two sisters and I were married here. Between 2002 and 2008, memorial services were held for both my parents and both of my sisters here in this church. My husband Tom and I have enjoyed active participation in King Avenue throughout our years since 1971 marriage. We have known and appreciated the excellent music program, the warm and caring fellowship, and especially the strength, faith, and influence of the ministers who have served here. Among the many leadership positions we have held, leading the UMYF, or Youth Fellowship, for 15 years was among our favorites. Jim and Jan Linker's daughter, Jenny, was in the 6th grade, and we decided to form this youth group for her, as well as others in middle and high school. Our monthly meetings were held in the homes of our MYFers, and over the 15 years, we became very close to so many families through those years. When Grayson Atha came to King Avenue, he brought a new energy, a wealth of wonderful stories, a deep faith, and a strong sense of justice to this church. As a congregation, we experienced some bumpy years as Grayson led us toward becoming a reconciling ministry. Of course, we knew that many of our members are gay, so many are good friends of ours. What we didn't know was the struggle our friends had endured as they navigated through the years, feeling unsure of their welcome here. Grayson told powerful stories and welcomed many witnesses to share their stories. He taught us to be open and welcoming to all and to be willing to say words like gays, lesbians, and homosexuals out loud. During this time, unfortunately, many of our wonderful friends decided that they could not feel right staying at King Avenue. It was so hard to see them leave this church. One Sunday, as you heard this morning, during children's moments, Grayson told the children that there are all kinds of families, some with two parents, some with one parent, some with two dads or two moms. That night, Bob Heber, the chair of the Pastor Parish Committee, was inundated with angry calls to fire the minister. He called an emergency meeting, and the committee discussed the concerns expressed by so many who had had years of leadership in our church. Even the bishop became involved. She gave Reverend Atha 1 year to do whatever he needed to do to fix the problem. The Pastor Parish Committee appointed a homosexuality study committee of about 20 people to work together for months to prepare a plan for King Avenue to become open and welcoming for all. My dad was honored to be on that committee. And after each meeting, on Sundays, he would share with the family. It was fascinating to learn of the struggles many of our good friends had experienced. Even when so many of our good friends decided to leave the church, my parents and my family readily stayed here, embracing the new direction and reaching out to get to know so many in our church who were coming out. Instead of our church dying from the loss of members, the membership began to grow. In 2001, a second service, Morning Blend, was started on September 9th. Just 2 days later, September 11th became an unforgettable date in the country's history. I recently told Grayson that I recalled on the Sunday after President Kennedy was assassinated, King Avenue broke attendance records, people needing solace and comforting. I asked him if after 9/11 he noticed a change. He remembered the first Sunday of Morning Blend, there were 70 people present. 1 week later, on September 16th, there were over 200 at Morning Blend. His sermon from that Sunday appeared in the October 2001 Carillon, our monthly church newsletter. Under the leadership of Grayson Atha, followed by the longest-serving senior minister, John Keeney, our church became one of the fastest-growing churches in our conference. We became known nationally as one of the leading reconciling churches and were called upon to share how we did it. Tom and I are currently serving on the History and Records Committee and in getting ready for the 100th anniversary of our church building in October of 2022. We worked with a dynamic committee of 7 people. Angela Finney, who chairs our group, Jetta Menser, Steve Herminghausen, Mark Brown, Tim Sublett, and ourselves. We worked well together, getting to know our history and attempting to tell our story. I remember talking with Brad Colgate, whose own story was a very moving one, and asking him to be interviewed for this book. He said, "I'm willing to do that, but I hate to see you go through that pain again." My response was quick. Even reliving that painful time of change, the story is powerful. And Brad, we won. They wanted Grayson Atha to be fired, but he actually served another 9 years before he reached the mandatory age of retirement. Brad, we won. Today we welcome all people and continue to grow in the fellowship of this fortress, this sanctuary, offering a safe space for those who choose to join us. Thank you.